Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We're at the Reporters Roundtable as we look at some of the top stories of the week, and there is a lot happening. Even today, the Trump administration is beginning more federal government layoffs. The government shutdown continues. The Department of Justice goes after another of the president's political foes. And Black churches are taking a stance against Christian white nationalists. And yes, there is still so much more to talk about. My guests are Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer and veteran journalist and former news director of the Prince George's Community Television, Curtis Crutchfield. Thank you both so much for joining the conversation. I need to start off the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, has announced that the federal government layoffs in the wake of the shutdown have begun. We don't know how many, but this is something that the president, Misha, has been promising since a week before the shutdown. And so here we are.
Yep. It is just, really sad to see it happen in action in real time. There, as you said, been announcements that people are officially losing their jobs now, as well as we don't know if military members will be receiving their paychecks. And the firings that these federal workers are going through again is, we know the security that people thought when getting that good government job, right? But this is more than just a shock of that. It is really changing people's lives and families' lives, and putting people in a position where they are not simply worried about their next paycheck, but about putting food in their families' mouths. And so we're in a really, really very difficult time for the nation. We were already struggling economically. And so to see this happen on top of the challenges that people have been facing in the nation is just really sad. And it seems like the president has no empathy for it. He said, some people deserve to have this happen to them, which is just incredibly sad to see. So we're just watching it. We're on day 10 of the government shutdown. And we're in a place where we're waiting for conversations maybe on Tuesday with the Senate. And so it's a limbo that is not at all fun for everybody involved. And I think that's really the nation and the world as they watch.
Yeah. Curtis, one of the things that we have seen even leading up to it is that municipalities, obviously Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and even the state is trying to help those federal government workers who have been furloughed and or fired. And now there were more coming. What impact do you think this is going to have on those local governments that are trying to help people keep their heads above water?
It's impacting local governments and state government as well. Across the state, the DMV has so many thousands and thousands of federal workers. And what's the impact not only on families? What's the impact on the economy as a whole? So the unemployment rate is going up. Trump has talked so often about being a great businessman and stirring the economy. He's not doing anything but damaging the economy, damaging services, damaging families and communities. I don't think it's sustainable. I'm not sure what to say. I think in general, with some of his policies and pronouncements, he wants the federal workforce, federal agencies to bend the knee to him, to adhere to what he wants, to adhere to his policies. And if you're not on board, so be it. You're out the door. So I'm not sure what to say about what else to say. I can't imagine what history will say, how history will judge this country, will judge this president, will judge the Republican Congress 2, 3, 4 years from now.
But something that struck me today, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was a federal government worker who lost her job during the late spring. She is looking for a job. And she said this to me, Misha, and I just want your reflection on this. She said, there are a lot of jobs out there for skilled federal government workers. But then she also hastened to say, but there were also a lot of people looking. And she said she can't even imagine those who are in positions of hiring, how they can even handle the influx of job seekers.
Harold, that's a great point. People have been looking for months, some since January, your friend since March. And the influx of federal workers that I think are continuing to seek new employment, whether because they've been furloughed or because they're concerned about the possibility of losing their jobs, I think is overwhelming for many of these employers. For many of the, we're talking a lot to people who are providing resources here in the DMV region in particular. And, I've been very impressed by some of the resource fairs and things that have come about so quickly, 3, 4, 5 days into the shutdown. But also when you're talking to some of those people, the resources, while abundant, there's so many people who now need to tap into them that they're seeing a major shift. So it's a lot of different factors to consider. You asked before about the different locales that will be affected by this. And, I think about the district who for months has been on a funding hold because of the federal government, the continuing resolution. And so when you're looking at $1 billion that the district can't even touch, and now with the government shutdown, that there are district workers who are paid by the federal government. And so you're thinking about those folks who, these agency heads locally who are being told, oh, well, we're hoping that we'll be reimbursed later down the line and we'll pay these folks out. But we're not talking just about federal government employees, but the trickle down effect at this point. And so people are looking, people are on the hunt, and your friend is right. While they're, you may go on LinkedIn and Indeed and see so many different jobs available where people, these federal workers who are incredibly skilled and with years of career experience to contribute to great organizations, but there are just so many of them.
Yeah, and I had an opportunity to talk to Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich earlier this week, and they, announced just yesterday, I believe it was, a program that's providing, preferential selection for those federal government workers who are looking for a job, looking for jobs, and the county is hiring. But Curtis, there are only so many jobs. The state, for example, even before this was happening, with the state trying to close its budget gap and dealing with the hiring freeze in Maryland, and now this happens. So I think, Curtis, this puts the governor, for example, in a really precarious position, because on one hand you've got a freeze, on the other hand you want to hire people to help save them. There doesn't look like there is any good fix.
There's only so much the state government, local governments can do as well. At the state level and at the county level, Prince George's County level, they had to, in the last budget cycle, preparing for this fiscal year, they had to trim, cut, and trim. So there is only so many dollars left available to provide services for federal workers, unemployed federal workers. So we're in a very tight situation financially, statewide and locally.
Yeah. I want to go on, Curtis, with the 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 federal government shutdown. We can mince words whether it's a partial shutdown or a complete shutdown, but the reality is it is a shutdown in so many ways. We saw the verbal fisticuffs between Republican Mike Lawler earlier this week and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And Curtis, it just seems to me to be uh, it paints a picture of the reality of the hostility, the adversarial relationship between both sides, and there's just no movement.
Is there a right or wrong? Federal workers today, I think for the first time since the shutdown, we're not getting paid today. That's the bottom line. Whether you want to blame the Republicans, they're in control of Congress, or blame the Democrats for being a stick in the mud, not being supportive or helpful. It's on both sides entirely. But I think the majority of the blame, if you want to blame anyone, it would be the Republican Party. The Democrats are sticking to their guns with regard to not supporting the budget because it would make major cuts in health care. So they have to think not of political considerations. They have to think of the people, what it's doing to the people. Uh, House Speaker Johnson, I think a few days ago, was confronted by a Republican on one of the major networks who was concerned that in a few days that her family's health benefits would be cut. So there's pressure on both sides. They have to come to an accord, come to a compromise to work out things that's in the best interest of the country, not the best interest of the Republican Party, not in the best interest of Donald Trump, not in the best interest of the Democrats. What's in the best interest of the country?
Yeah, but Misha, to Curtis's point, the politics over the people or party over the people, I think, is seen more now than ever before. Certainly the big shutdown that we saw in 2018, yes, that was a big deal. A record time, 35 days. But in speaking again, this is anecdotally speaking with some of my friends who are in the federal government, whether they've been furloughed or whether they are exempt, they always tell me that this feels different.
I mean, I can only imagine what the people who are working for the federal government and have been doing so for many years or even just started are feeling right now. But definitely the people who lived through 2018 and experienced that as a federal government worker, and even as laymen or those of us who were covering it at the time and remember how folks were struggling. I think initially, if we remember, we didn't think that the shutdown would last so long. And so it going over a month, I think was really shocking at the time. And I was going to precursor this by saying there is no coincidence, to me at least, that it's the same president in 2018 and 2025. But I do think that we know that there's a bit of a difference in how this president is operating 7 years later. And so if they're feeling that tension on top of the fact that I think that the partisan nature of this fight is very different and feels very different, then, if their antennas are high up, then we need to ensure that ours are as well, because they're hearing and been a part of conversations that we could only have hoped to be a fly on the wall from a journalist perspective. And they know sort of the ins and outs and how they're agencies and departments were being affected even beforehand. If you talk to many federal government workers, there was a sense of panic in the air far before mid-September and October 1st. This was, people were still slowly being furloughed, and without the large numbers that we were talking about when DOGE first did the large furloughs. But I think, again, if they're feeling like it's a difference, it's because there is, and part of it is that no one is trying to talk. No one, we talk about no one wanting to acquiesce. It seems like no one even wants to have a conversation. It's all right.
Hold that point. I'll let you finish your point, but I do need to take a quick break and remind everyone that you can hear this at every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about some of the top stories of the week. Indeed, top stories of the day. My guests are Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer, and Curtis Crutchfield, veteran journalist and former news director of the Prince George's County TV station, Prince George's County TV. Curtis, I want to give you that extra long, that extra long title. Misha, please finish your point.
Yeah, I was just saying, at the place that we're in right now, there is certainly a shift in where we are politically, socially, economically, even than what we were in 2018. And so if we're looking at that, and if federal government workers are feeling a difference, we certainly can say, I think, with the assurance that there is something concerning in the wind, and I think part of that is the extreme sense of partisan politics that has people not even talking to one another. We saw, I talked to a lot of congressmen during the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation annual legislative conference who noted the Speaker of the House, among other legislators, who decided to leave right before the government, leave town right before the government shut down. The productive conversations have not been happening, and there have been a lot of legislators who are calling it out, but what is being done? And so I'm concerned. I don't want another longer than a month shutdown. So many people are affected, and we see that the trickle down effect is insane. It's not just the government workers, but the restaurants, the business owners all around who are not getting the patrons that they are accustomed to because folks don't have their jobs.
And this is the final point that I'll make on this before we move to the next topic. But Curtis, Misha makes an important point. The threat of not getting back pay is really problematic. That is one of the things that really strikes me, Curtis. Let us say that this goes on for 2 pay cycles. This isn't about that next pay cycle of someone getting a check or direct deposit, however they get paid, that pays them for the month that they missed. They're going to have to go forward. And to Misha's point, that means there's going to be a strain on the news services that are being offered to help support federal government workers, but there could very well be strains on the economy as a whole, even with a 1-month shutdown hole, Curtis.
This is absolutely demoralizing for federal workers and their families. Short-term and long-term, what does this say about the services that the federal government has to provide? What does it have to say about recruiting new workers? Let's say the IRS or other vital agencies need more workers. Would you work for the IRS or any other agency knowing what has happened to federal workers in the last 9-10 months Who would want to work for an agency or a federal agencies, federal government that treats its employees as if they're commodities? It's about providing services. So let's say you're just getting out of college or grad school, and you have a lot of options. The federal government is recruiting you. Knowing its history in the last year or so, are you going to consider working for the federal government? The State Department likes bringing on board young people, young smart people. Are young smart people going to want to represent and serve their country overseas, knowing how the federal government treats its workers, its employees? It's going to make recruitment hard. People who are doing the work, maybe they'll be doing just enough to get by, won't be seeking to do on a daily basis, really doing work to the best of his or her ability. So it has to have a demoralizing effect on those who are working and those who have left their jobs as well.
Yeah. Let me move on to this next topic. Yesterday, New York Attorney General Letitia James was federally indicted. All of this related to a mortgage application for a second home. This is the second criminal issue that has come up against President Trump's enemies. Of course, there was James Comey, the FBI director, who has been accused of lying to Congress, and now Letitia James. I want to play what she said in response to this indictment, and then I'll get your comments on the other side.
I'm a proud woman of faith, and I know that faith and fear cannot share the same space. And so today, I'm not fearful. I'm fearless. And as my faith teaches me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. We will fight these baseless charges aggressively, and my office will continue to fiercely protect New Yorkers and their rights. And I will continue to do my job.
Misha, there was some reporting out today that Attorney General Pam Bondi was blindsided by this indictment coming out of the federal court in Virginia of Letitia James. Also, the reporting that a private message that President Trump was sending to Pam Bondi that he ended up posting on Truth Social about the fact that he felt that the DOJ was dragging its feet in starting prosecutions against his enemies. 10 years ago, this would be a great big, smoking gun, and any other president would certainly back off or need to address it. But so far, the president has only really addressed these issues with a shrug.
Because he knows, just like the rest of the world watching, that this is a petty at its finest. And so I'm not shocked that Pam Bondi is saying that this caught her off guard. We know that this president says a lot and makes a lot of threats and says a lot of things off the cuff. And so I can't imagine that this did not come up in conversation as he's been beginning to speak more and more about coming after political foes. That said, we also know this president acts really quickly without going to his directors and cabinet to say that he's going to make certain decisions. And so I think this is one of those moments where he made this decision and made it happen without really Pam Bondi knowing that that the lawsuit was going to take place at this moment. That said, first of all, I have to shout out my sorority sister, Letitia James. Alpha Kappa Alpha has proudly celebrated her leadership. And I think that this is a moment where we see her saying, yeah, I know I made a mistake. It was a mistake that she corrected a long time ago. And she is aware that the president is capable of coming after her because he's mad. This is not something that he's new to him. He's done this with Letitia James before in particular. So, good for her for not really playing fully into the circus that is this game that the president is putting forward. But anywho, she is by no means in the 3 ring.
Yeah, she's definitely not a shrinking violet in this regard. Your thoughts to how she has responded, and even James Comey, who last week said, as relates to the accusations of him him lying to Congress, that he said that he is innocent. Curtis.
First, this point about Pam Bondi saying she didn't know anything about the indictment, that she was blindsided. Who believes that in their right mind that she did not know that? The Attorney General from Virginia works for her, under the Justice Department. I can't believe a high-profile high-profile indictment came out against one of the president's enemies, and she didn't know anything about it. That's ludicrous. I've heard this said so many times by attorneys, prosecutors, that if a prosecutor, any prosecutors could indict anyone for a ham sandwich. So if they wanted to go after someone
with honey mustard,
yeah,
and tomatoes and lettuce,
I think these are, in my mind, in my view, purely political. And I'm sure at some point that they'll be thrown out. Can't imagine they'll get far in the judicial process. Adam Schiff, I know the senator from California, I believe.
Yes.
The president has talked about going after him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So talking about James Comey, Letitia James, these are both attorneys. I can't believe they did anything legally that did not they didn't cross their T's and dot their I's. So it's just unbelievable what this administration is doing.
I do want to move on to this next issue, and this is really fascinating, and for Black people of faith, when looking at this issue on the surface, and I'm talking about not just the immigration issue, but just overall, what you learned in Sunday school, what you're learning in Bible study, and this really puts, Misha, a very fine point. It almost makes you wonder whether or not are Black people of faith and white people of faith reading from the same biblical text. On this past Monday, the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ, Otis Moss, and others in Chicago came out to the pulpit with the same anti-authoritarian, anti-ICE sermons and speeches. And I want to play a little bit from Pastor Moss, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Our city is under siege, not from foreign forces, but our city is under siege from those who I like to call Confederate apologists, and antebellum fanboys. We are going to speak and speak loudly in reference to what is happening, because this is immoral. This has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Whatever, Jesus never called families to be separated, for children to be zip-tied, for seniors to be traumatized. This has nothing to do with the gospel, and has nothing to do with, quote unquote, finding people who are undocumented or illegal. We are living in a moment of authoritarianism in this nation.
You know, Misha, for those of us who have studied Black history, as we know, when Black people were enslaved in this country, that the white owners interpreted biblical scripture so that it would fit their support or involvement in chattel slavery, their political ends, their social ends. Are we in that same space again?
Absolutely. I mean, we are seeing a lot of interpretations of the sacred texts that I think is being used in order to preach hate, to preach oppression, to preach fascism, racism, all of those homophobia, and certainly to preach this anti, and I'd say un-American, really, way of welcoming our neighbors from different countries into the United States. The United States is founded on immigrants from different countries, a beautiful melting pot, making the country what it is today. And we know, we've seen glimpses of that hope, and when the melting pot is done right, when diversity, equity, and inclusion is embraced, when immigrants are embraced. And so I'm really happy to see people like Otis Moss III, who, I don't know why you made me go after he just laid it on us like that in such an eloquent way, but using the power of the pulpit to push back against these ICE raids. And I love to see that the Black church is doing it. We've seen the Black church be a major source of activism and for social justice and equity from many movements throughout history, from the abolition movement to civil rights to where we are today. I mean, even, you know, I've heard a lot of Black pastors talk about the importance of Black churches stepping up in a major way. And so shout out to him. I just want to briefly offer a call to action, though, to, you know, I see a lot of churches and leaders from denominations that are not traditionally Black who are still, you know, speaking out against these ICE raids and different oppressive policies, but not to the extent that it is publicized. So I'm calling folks out to do so. It is time. I mean, the unity is necessary. And I'm also going to shout out another great theologian in Chicago, who is my mama, Bishop Paula Clark, the first Black and first woman Bishop of Chicago, who went to see one of her parishioners, one of the folks in Chicago who are part of the Episcopal Diocese of Chicago, who was imprisoned, detained due to an ICE raid, and was taken out of Illinois to Michigan. And so we need to just see more faith leaders like Otis Moss, like my mama, Bishop Paula Clark, stepping up in that way.
Shout out to your mother. Curtis, we've always known that white Christian nationalism was an issue in this country. It seems to have resurfaced in a very, very powerful way. What role do you believe that, you know, the Black church, Chicago or otherwise for that matter, or even churches that are not Black, what role might they have in addressing this?
What you heard, what you played from that pastor, progressive pastors, progressive churches of goodwill, if you will, they have to continue to speak out during community meetings, community forums, public platforms, be it network platforms or independent platforms, out in the community and in their church, saying that the teachings of Jesus teach love, not hate. The nation was a Republican base, if you will, was traumatized by the death, the murder, assassination of Charlie Kirk a few weeks ago. And in a lot of ways, he was portrayed as a martyr, a Christian martyr. But much of the reporting did not speaking ill of Charlie Kirk, but much of the reporting didn't talk about many of his hateful comments about Black women, hateful comments about people of color, hateful comments about gay people. The teachings of Christ aren't about hate; they're about love. So that speaks to a divide in the Christian church. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and one of the speakers talked about there's always been a Black church and a white church. If churches, religious leaders truly followed the teachings of Christ, there wouldn't be a need for a white or a Black church. There would be just a church that welcomed everyone. A church that was supportive of immigrants, a church that's supportive of people fleeing their countries for a better way of life. You spoke earlier of America being very, in the past, welcoming to immigrants. That has not always been the case. What has happened in the past to Haitian immigrants? What has happened in the past to in the 30s and 20s to Chinese immigrants, Japanese immigrants? So America
No,
has
sorry, I
always.
want to correct that. I don't think I said that they were welcoming. I said that that's what our country has been founded on.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
that they've been welcomed. Let me fact check that.
Thank you. So
And let me, and to both of your points, when you talk about immigrants, Curtis, when you talk about Chinese immigrants, it's one thing for you to be able to pick out someone of a different racial group, be they, West African, be they Hispanic, be they Asian. But if you do the deep dive, and I think this is one of the things that is missing, and to your point, Curtis, that during the late 1800s and early 1900s, you could be white but Italian, you could be white but Irish, and still face discrimination. Certainly not the same kind of immigrant-related discrimination that people of color in this country have seen. But unfortunately, as Misha said, that's what it says, on the statue of the Statue of Liberty. But this country has always had a problem with immigrants, othering them, and we see so much more of that.
we welcome your tired and hungry masses, unless.
Exactly.
Right.
And I just have to say it because we talked about this country having a problem othering immigrants. This country has a problem of othering anybody that is not of Anglo, because we're looking at the weekend before Indigenous Peoples Week and day, on Monday. And the President of the United States has declared that next Monday will be Columbus Day and not celebrating the people who started here first. So
the more you know. Speaking of the president, as these last handful of minutes, and I'll start with you, Misha. This is an historic week. There's a ceasefire in Gaza. Palestinians are literally today returning to that area. Israeli troops are leaving that area. It is a fragile ceasefire, and this is good news if it holds. But it does make me it really does make me wonder. The Nobel Peace Prize announced today, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado won the prize, even as she remains, in hiding because of death threats. And I guess the only thing that I'm thinking about, Misha, is, and we know who the president is. It's one thing to work for peace in the Middle East, but why not just work for peace sake instead of what appears to be working so that he could receive a Nobel Peace Prize? One could argue, Misha, that may be one of the reasons why he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think that anyone who is working for the prize should be receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. It is working for the sake of peace and in ensuring, at least in this case, that not only that there's a ceasefire, but that there is peace in Palestine. The Palestinian people have spent, at this point, almost a century experiencing extreme oppression and what they've experienced for the past 2 years, since October 7th, 2023, the amount of displacement and thousands of lives lost. I mean, we are in a place at this point where we're not just talking about ceasefire. We are talking about, I hope, in the president's 21-point plan, where we are working toward peace in general for the Middle East, as you said, and certainly the Palestinian people who have been incredibly persecuted. And so if he's working for the Nobel Peace Prize, I would say keep working. Obviously, the announcements were made today and he wasn't on the list. But, if something beautiful like a sustained ceasefire and preserving peace in Palestine comes from this, then kudos to all of the leaders who have spent time to make that happen.
Yeah. Curtis, I'll let you have the last minute.
Nobel Peace Prize for what? Why would someone advocate, lobby for a peace prize? It's good. It's great that there's a ceasefire. What happens next? It was announced the other day, yesterday actually, that 200 or so U.S. troops would be sent to Israel to help in various ways. The United Nations is going in with humanitarian aid. That's first and foremost. There needs to be a lasting peace, humanitarian relief, and a process for a two-state solution. Benjamin Netanyahu has said often that he doesn't want that. What is the United Nations going to do? What are the Western powers, the Arab powers, going to do to make sure this peace is sustained? That's what's most important. So I remember a statement a former Jewish colleague had mentioned to me some years ago. He talked about race relations in the U.S. being so very bad, and he said, as bad as race relations are in America, it's worse in Palestine, between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So there has to be people of goodwill on both sides who actively advocate for peace. There has to be a two-state solution. Otherwise, at some point, it's going to blow up again. What has happened in the last 2 years is the worst that region has seen since the founding of Israel in 1948. So there has to be a two-state solution. There has to be a lasting peace.
Yeah, I think we will have that be the last word. Misha Green, Curtis Crutchfield, thank you both for spending some time with us and analyzing the top stories of the week, top stories of the day. and we will be talking. I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, October 10th. For News Director Renee Nash, I'm Harold Fisher.